My friends, today it's time for another room build, specifically a place for my little buddy Chucky. You guys remember Chucky and Carbonite, right? Well, this whole time we've wanted to have a place to put him in the room. And it just so happens that this area to the left of our alien Nostromo wall is perfect for a Chucky and Carbonite display. So what I've got is a couple of pieces of 1/2" MDF. This first sheet where Chucky's going to be mounted is going to be raised up off the wall slightly, with a second sheet cut narrowly and recessed. This will allow us to get some different dimensionality and add interest to the overall piece. I also want to set this up so that Chucky is at eye level with me in his position on the wall. Eye level for me is roughly 67 inches. So here's the deal. Got our Carbonite up here at the top, pads down at the bottom, and these pads will line up in orientation as the other pads in the rest of the room. This is the area I want to deal with next. What I want to do is lay out a design in Illustrator that you're seeing here, and this will be all the laser cut parts so that I can create panelization all around the outside of Chucky. We have these panels temporarily in place. I want this section here to be a recess. These are recesses. This area here is going to actually have an LCD screen. We need to mark and then cut that space out so that this is open below. How it goes. Now, I've got him recessed in this space because I can't have him sticking way out. Plus, I like the idea of having this cove. What we'll be able to do is light up some of this recess area in here. The next step we need to take, I think, is to prep the surface, do any sanding and filling and sealing. Then we can get this whole thing its initial paint job and then start working on the fun stuff. What I'm doing is I want to create interesting space, the recess behind this panel. I've taken another piece of acrylic and I was able to create the outline of the space that I need to add dimensions of greeblies and details. So what we're going to do is bring out a whole bunch of interesting parts and pieces, building out the recess detail in this area. So these switches are interesting. I've had them for a really long time. Most of them are missing components inside to actually make them work. You see them a lot of time in heavy machinery operation. I've even seen them in Disney at different spots. Because of the back being open, we'll be able to put an LED down here and cause this to glow. Last one. Here we go. Now you got some really cool looking LEDs. Got a little gunmetal spray on it. focus a little bit on this area here. Here we have just a small sampling of the greeblies I collect. It's almost a perfect fit. Remember when I took an old coffee machine apart? The coffee maker had this. Is actually where the pods fit. And occasionally, things just fit together pretty nicely. So what I did was I took a couple of pieces of acrylic that I had left over as scrap and I sprayed them with a couple of different grays. I want to compare that to our dark gray latex background here. This gloss here doesn't quite feel right. It's too far away from the range of color within that gray, but this lighter gray should pop and make the panel stand out. So I did a further paint job on one of the panels and I like the way that looks, so we're going to go with that gray. Okay, I'd say we did a pretty dang good job of getting our greeblies picked out, getting them in place. Now there's some tidying up we're going to need to do before we do the final installation, but overall, this worked out pretty well. Let's assume for the moment that maybe you don't have a whole box of greeblies, or you don't have a lot of random parts and pieces you can collect from old electronics, but you do have a computer and a 3D printer. There's plenty of ways you can use software to create your own greeblies and 3D print them. Got a couple of different versions right here that we've painted up that we're going to use in this project. And they were all created using Fusion 360. Once these were printed, I also took measurements and came up with a design that we could use on the laser cutter on the acrylic. This allows us to perfectly place our laser cut panels and the 3D printed greeblies. Okay, you awesome geeks, it's time to talk about pads. In Star Wars, in a lot of the spaceships and a lot of the environments, pads are seen everywhere. You see them in bunks, you see them on benches, you see them on archways, you see them in corridors. And they can be a very iconic thing when it comes to the environmental design used in Star Wars. Okay, so we're going to take our Mod Podge here, and I've got a disposable brush. We're just trying to make sure that we get the foam completely covered with the Mod Podge. More glue. The wetness of the glue as it starts to work into the actual paper towel, these shop towels specifically will form a texture that you can see. And there we go. We've got everything laid in on this first piece. Now we just have to let this fully dry. What we do need to do next is apply the paint. And I would suggest if you're going to build a lot of spaces, write down the color or the type of paint you used 4 years ago. I did not. So I've been trying to color match as best I can to get the cream color on these pads to match the cream color on our other pads. So let's go ahead and apply the paint. We can let that dry and then we can weather. I want to point out that in the past, I've used my critter gun, which is essentially a spray gun, to apply the paint. The roller brush will leave brush marks. I've got a problem with my critter gun right now, so I can't spray it. So I'm going to use the roller brush, and then I'm going to go ahead and take a paper towel and use the dab technique to remove all of the brush strokes and leave us with a little bit of a texture. And now our last step for the pads is a little paint and weathering. The last step in weathering on this, take a bigger brush with the brownish color and really dilute it down with the water. And now we're basically doing a wash over this. Right now, we're on to the wiring of the electronics portion of things. I'm going to use a free software that I'll put a link in the description to actually do some wiring diagrams. But there was enough going on that I wanted to be able to wire this all correctly. I'm also going to use a series of these little buses. We can mount these to the actual project and then land all of the LEDs on one side, and then we can wire everything really cleanly out the other side. So I'm working on this wiring nightmare I've got going on here. I have in my possession here this pretty cool set of solder seal connectors. The connector itself here in the center is a band of solder. The rest of it is the shrink tubing. We're going to put the wire in between, and then we hit it with a little heat and it'll seal this solder together and make the connection. It doesn't take much to melt that solder. Just a slick way of splicing our wires together. Let's take a look at that wiring. I've run most of the LEDs into buses and then wired them all back to a central location and disperse them evenly between both sides of the project. You might be saying to yourself, Brian, that's a lot of wiring, and there are easier ways to do this. And you're correct. We're using an Arduino, and the Arduino is going to allow me to control and program certain LEDs the way I want to. I've wired some of the LEDs directly to the Arduino, and then others I'm powering off of a 12-volt power supply because they're 12-volt LEDs. This is just a simple LED strip. I'm going to put a link in the description. It has great diffusion, and my friend Martine was the one that turned me on to it. We wanted to do everything around this frame so that when we install Chucky and the details here, we'll get a nice glow. We also installed an LCD here. Now, I've used these before. I'm going to put a link there you can check out to see how we've done and utilized this before. But in this case, we've added a custom Chucky with various text to show what the status of Chucky is in his carbonite chamber. All right, now we can take it downstairs and start getting it installed. Here's the corner where we're going to install things. Let me walk you through what I did. The big greebly detail here just got mounted to the wall and leveled. And then up here, I just cut a couple of 2x4 pieces, mounted those into the wall up above, and then down below. And that should allow us to just slide this thing in place and install it. out away from the wall so we could get Chucky installed. The install of this is simple. There's basically a bracket that acts like a French cleat that's bolted on here and then on the wall.
It has actually been a lot longer than I thought since we did anything substantial for our room build project. I think with projects like this, the size and scale, with how indecisive I am and how specific I want to be, sometimes I just need to take a break and step away from it for a while. But I'm really glad we took this project on, and I'm glad it turned out the way it did because we're super excited about it. We hope you really enjoyed it because it got us reinvigorated to take some major steps. I don't know how quickly that'll be. This one took me a lot longer than I wanted to, but overall, it put me in the right headspace to take some next steps, to redo some things, and make some major improvements. So if you enjoyed this, if you're still with us after all this time, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already because it makes a big difference, and we'll see you the next time we build something out of nothing.